I never thought the worst hangover of my life would come with a marriage certificate attached to it. When I opened my eyes that morning, my head was splitting and the room felt completely wrong. Too quiet, too unfamiliar. I lay still for a moment, staring at the ceiling, trying to remember where I was. Then I saw it, a small red booklet sitting on the bedside table beside me. I reached over and picked it up with both hands. My name was printed inside, and next to it, hers, Rachel Liu. I read it 3 times. Then I sat up so fast the room spun. Of all the people in the world, in the entire city, I had somehow stumbled drunk into a civil affairs bureau and married Rachel Liu, the eldest daughter of the most powerful family here. The girl who used to ruffle my hair when I was a kid like I was her little brother. She was older than me, impossibly composed, and so far above my station that the whole thing felt less like a marriage and more like a disaster. I set the booklet down. I picked it up again. Still the same names. Rachel was already awake, sitting across the room with that calm expression she always wore, like nothing in the world could rattle her. She watched me spiral in silence for a while before she finally decided to say something. "How much do you actually remember?" she asked. "Almost nothing," I admitted. "I was at the bar. There was a drinking competition. Someone kept refilling my glass. After that, complete blank." Rachel explained it quietly. She had been at the same bar for a business meeting that ran late. She was about to leave when she spotted me sitting alone, drinking like I had a personal grudge against every bottle in the place. She tried to help me home, but drunk me, apparently, had taken the situation in a completely different direction. I stared at the floor. I couldn't even be angry at myself. I was too embarrassed. "Rachel," I said carefully, "I am genuinely, deeply sorry. This is 100% my fault. You can yell at me. You can hit me. You can tell your father and let him handle it. Whatever you need, I'll accept all of it." She tilted her head. A small smile appeared at the corner of her lips, the kind of smile that made me feel like I was missing something obvious. "And if I said you should take responsibility?" she asked. The word landed differently than I expected. I looked at her, really looked at her. At the way the morning light caught her face, at the completely unfair way she managed to look elegant even in this absurd situation. My heart did something stupid and inconvenient in my chest. I forced myself to think clearly. "Rachel," I said, "there are probably 1,000 men in this city who would trade everything they own to be sitting where I'm sitting right now. But that's exactly the point. You deserve someone who actually deserves you. If I stay, I'm just holding you back. We should get divorced as soon as possible. I'll find a proper way to make it up to you." Something shifted in her expression. It was brief, barely a flicker, but I caught it. "Just like that?" she said quietly. "Divorced? We don't have any emotional foundation." "There's a 30-day cooling off period," she said, cutting me off. "The law requires it, so even if you wanted a divorce today, you can't have one for a month." She paused. "And during that month, my grandfather is going to keep pushing me toward blind dates. He has been for years. If you walk out right now, I go straight back to that." I didn't have an answer for that. She continued almost carefully. "What if I told you I liked you?" The room went completely silent. My brain stopped producing thoughts entirely. "Are you serious?" I finally managed. Then she laughed. A full, genuine laugh that broke the whole moment apart. "I'm joking," she said. "Relax. You looked like you were about to faint." I exhaled slowly. But even as the tension left my shoulders, something about that laugh felt slightly too quick, too practiced. She settled back and spoke more calmly. "Here's what I'm actually saying. The marriage is registered. Divorce takes 30 days minimum anyway. My grandfather has been on my case about marriage for years, and he's not going to stop, so why not just try? Give it the 30 days. If there's nothing there, we end it properly, and I'll make sure no one blames you. Just treat it as doing your older sister a favor." I looked at her for a long moment. It wasn't the worst proposal I had ever heard. And the reality was, I had caused this. She hadn't. Whatever happened next, I owed her at least that much. All right, I said. I'll try. Rachel took me to meet Grandpa Liu that same afternoon. I had known the old man my whole childhood, but standing at the gate of the Liu family villa as her husband was an entirely different experience. My feet slowed down on their own as we approached the entrance. Rachel glanced over at me. "You weren't this nervous when you dragged me to the Civil Affairs Bureau last night," she said. "I was completely unconscious last night," I replied. As we walked through the gate, she reached over smoothly and took my arm, a natural, unhesitating motion, like it was the most ordinary thing in the world. The warmth of her hand sent an immediate jolt straight through me that I was absolutely not prepared for. My face went hot. She noticed. She said nothing, but the corner of her mouth moved just slightly. Grandpa Liu's voice reached us before we even got to the study, loud and sharp and full of energy that had no business being in a man his age. "You finally decided to come back. Where is he? Where's the man you've been talking about for years? My Rachel is 1 in a million and you're telling me no one is good enough?" Rachel led me inside. The old man looked up from his chair and his expression shifted immediately from irritation to recognition. "Jason, my God, is that really you? Come here, let me get a proper look. How many years has it been?" He grabbed my shoulder hard enough to make my knees bend slightly, then turned to Rachel with eyes that were sharp and clear despite his age. He wasn't fooled easily. I could see that immediately. "All right," he said. "What's actually going on? You two walked in together looking like that. Talk." Rachel didn't hesitate. She folded her hands and spoke clearly and calmly, as though she had rehearsed this exact moment, which I was beginning to suspect she had. "Grandpa, I've never told you this before, but I've always had feelings for Jason. He's been the only one I've ever genuinely waited for. That's why I kept refusing every blind date you arranged. I couldn't pretend interest in someone else. Yesterday, we finally said the truth to each other, and then we went to the Civil Affairs Bureau and registered." Grandpa Liu stared at her, then at me. His eyebrows climbed slowly up his forehead. "You already registered?" he said. "We didn't want to wait any longer," Rachel said simply. The silence lasted about 3 seconds. Then he slammed his palm on the desk and let out a laugh that rattled the windows. "I always said this boy was the right one. Years ago I said it." He pointed at me. "You should have come to me sooner. I would have arranged everything. I'll buy the place where you two got together as a wedding gift. Just name it." I was sweating in places I didn't know I could sweat. Rachel's eyes found mine briefly, calm, steady, carrying one clear message. I took a breath and nodded. "I've had feelings for Rachel for a long time," I said. "From the very first time I remember seeing her." Rachel's composure cracked, just for a second. Her cheeks went faintly pink and she looked away toward the window. Grandpa Liu didn't notice. He was already talking about wedding plans. Grandpa Liu wasn't done yet. He turned to my father with the energy of a man half his age and asked which school I had attended, whether he could get the principal's contact information, and whether there was anyone important worth reaching out to. My father laughed and played along, and I stood there in the background, thinking that this was the single most surreal morning of my entire life. Then Grandpa Liu did something that made it worse. He looked at Rachel and me standing side by side, clasped his hands together with great ceremony, and announced that since we were already married, there was absolutely no reason for us to be sleeping in separate rooms. Rachel went red. I went red. The two of us exchanged one panicked glance and said absolutely nothing. Grandpa Liu took our silence as agreement and looked extremely pleased with himself. I coughed. "Grandpa Liu," I said carefully, "we actually want to wait until after the proper wedding ceremony. She's quite traditional about these things." Grandpa Liu squinted at me. "You've already got the certificate." "We know," Rachel said smoothly, "but we want to do it properly, a real wedding first. Please understand." He grumbled. He shook his head. He muttered something about young people being strange, but he accepted it, mostly because Rachel gave him a look that made even a retired military man rethink his position. Then his expression shifted from irritated to scheming, and somehow that was more alarming. Fine, he said, waving a hand. "Then we do this properly. I'll have the butler contact the relatives. We'll get the wedding dresses, the rings, the venue, the cars. Grandpa will handle everything. You two just focus on each other. And then," he pointed at both of us with tremendous authority, You give me a grandson. A healthy one. Soon. Rachel pulled me out of the Liu family villa about 15 minutes later. My head was still spinning. I barely registered getting into the car, and by the time I came back to my senses, Rachel had already parked, smoothly, precisely, in front of a shopping mall. "What are we doing here?" I asked. She turned to me with a calm smile. "Wedding outfits." My expression froze. She laughed, quietly to herself, and got out of the car. Inside the mall, Rachel led me to a high-end men's suit section and told me, with great generosity, to pick whatever I liked. She would help me choose. And since I was her husband, she would of course be paying. I stopped walking. "Rachel," I said, "I can't take your money." She tilted her head. "Why not?" "Because it's your money. I have a salary. I have savings. I'm not going to stand here and let my wife pay for my wedding suit." She looked at me for a moment, with an expression I couldn't quite read. Then her lips curved into something soft and a little teasing. "You're my husband," she said. "You came first. And maybe someday things will be different, and you'll be taking care of me instead. But right now, let me." She paused. "Think of it as a dowry, going in the other direction." Then she turned and walked off in another direction before I could argue further, leaving me standing alone in the men's section with 2 very attentive shop assistants and approximately 7 suits already being pulled from the racks. I tried on a few. They fit well. The fabric was the kind that made you stand up straighter without meaning to. I was almost relaxed, almost starting to believe this strange day might end reasonably, when I heard a voice I recognized immediately cut through the background noise of the mall. "Jason, what are you doing here?" I turned around slowly. Serena was standing at the entrance of the suit shop, one hand on her bag, staring at me with wide eyes. Beside her was Ethan, her new boyfriend, my former college classmate, the same man she had told me repeatedly was just a friend. I had not been prepared to see either of them today. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice flat. Ethan smiled, the kind of smile designed to establish territory. He put a hand on Serena's shoulder and looked around the shop with exaggerated interest. "Nice place," he said. "Bit above your usual range, isn't it?" Serena said nothing. She was watching me with an unreadable expression. Not quite guilty, not quite sorry, but something in between that I didn't have the energy to interpret. The 3 of us had been college classmates together. Serena had been on the student council. Ethan had been one of the senior figures there, and she had always insisted they were just colleagues, just friends, nothing more. I had believed her. I had told myself I was being paranoid. I had pushed the feeling down for the entire last year of our relationship until the morning I finally saw a message I wasn't supposed to see and understood I had been right all along. That was yesterday. I had gone to a bar to deal with it. I had ended up married to someone else by midnight. "I'm shopping," I said simply. Ethan laughed. "Shopping here? Do you know what the suits in this store cost? Some of them are over 80,000. You sure you can handle that?" Serena glanced at the racks around us and then back at me. Something was moving behind her eyes, some calculation I didn't want to spend time decoding. "Jason," she said carefully, "these clothes aren't cheap. If anything gets damaged—" "He's not here to browse," one of the shop assistants said, stepping forward with quiet authority. "Mr. Jason is here for his wedding outfit. If you're not purchasing anything, I would appreciate it if you didn't disturb our other guests." Serena's expression flickered. "Wedding outfit?" Ethan's smile went slightly rigid at the corners. "Right," he said, recovering quickly. "A man without money shopping for wedding clothes in a place like this. That's quite the guest." He pulled out a card and twirled it between his fingers. "Some of us actually have accounts here, just so you know." "Then some of you," said a cool, clear voice from behind me, "should use those accounts somewhere else." I turned around. Rachel had come back. She had changed. She was standing at the entrance to the fitting area in a white wedding dress, the kind that looked like it had been designed specifically for her face and no one else's. The fabric caught the light. Every person in the shop went very quiet. Even Ethan stopped talking. Rachel walked toward me at a measured pace, completely unhurried, as though the entire shop belonged to her. which, I would later find out, it essentially did. She stopped beside me and tilted her head slightly, looking at me with a small smile. "How does it look?" she said softly. I couldn't find words immediately. Yeah, it looks good." She turned to face Serena and Ethan. Her expression didn't change. Her voice stayed perfectly level. "Security," she said, not loudly. "Someone is harassing my husband. Please remove them." Serena's mouth fell open. His what?" 2 security guards appeared from either side with remarkable speed. Ethan stepped back instinctively. Serena grabbed his arm and started to protest, loudly, increasingly desperately, about rights and lawsuits and black cards and mall owners. Rachel watched them without blinking. "My name is Rachel Liu," she said calmly, when Serena paused to take a breath. "This mall is part of our family's holdings, and this man is my husband. I'd suggest you stop talking now." The effect was immediate. The color drained out of both their faces at the same time. The guards escorted them out. The shop returned to silence. Rachel turned back to me as though nothing had happened and gently took my arm. "You okay?" she asked quietly. I swallowed. "Yeah," I said. "You didn't have to do that." "I know." She tilted her head at the mirror nearby. "Now, which suit?" I looked at her profile for a moment. The complete calm of her expression, the way she had stepped in without hesitation, the way she had stood next to me like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Rachel," I said slowly, "how did you know about Serena? You called her by name earlier." She paused, just barely. "You mentioned her last night," she said easily. "When you were drunk, you kept saying the name." I thought about that. It was possible. Drunk people say all kinds of things, but something about the way she answered, slightly too smooth, slightly too prepared, stayed with me as we moved on through the afternoon. We picked the suit. Rachel tried on 2 more dresses. By the time we left the mall, the sun was lower in the sky, and I was carrying more shopping bags than I had owned possessions 2 days ago. Rachel drove. I sat in the passenger seat, watching the city move past the window, replaying the day in my mind from the beginning. The marriage certificate, the grandparents, the mall, Serena's face when she heard Rachel's name. At some point, Rachel spoke without looking away from the road. "Did you love her?" she asked. "Serena." I thought about it honestly. "I thought I did," I said. "For 3 years I thought so. But the way it ended, if it was real love, it shouldn't have ended like that." Rachel said nothing for a moment. 3 years, she repeated quietly. "That's a long time to invest in the wrong person." "Yeah." I looked at my hands. "Can I ask you something now?" How did you really know her name?" Rachel's hands stayed steady on the wheel. She didn't answer immediately. Then, without looking at me, she smiled. Just slightly, just at the edge. "Get some rest, little guy," she said. "Long day tomorrow." She never answered the question. I had gone to Serena's apartment building to pick up my laptop. It was the last thing I had left there after moving out, and I needed it for work. Simple enough, or so I thought. When I knocked, the door opened and Serena stood there staring at me. For a moment she looked genuinely surprised. Then something shifted in her expression. A flicker of something calculated moving behind her eyes. And she smiled. "I knew it," she said. "Rachel Liu took you somewhere and now you've come back. I get it. The Liu family is impressive, but honestly, Jason, you and I both know you don't belong in that world." I stared at her. "I came for my computer." "You don't have to pretend," she continued as though I hadn't spoken. "I'm not angry. These things happen. Just come inside and we can talk properly." "Serena," I said clearly, "I'm not here to talk. I'm here for my laptop. That's it." Her expression cooled slightly. "You want a computer? Fine." She stepped back and pointed toward the window. "Go get it yourself." I walked past her and into the apartment. It was strange being back. Not sad, just strange. Like visiting a place that had already finished meaning something. I spotted my laptop bag on the desk near the window and reached for it. Then I heard the window open behind me. I turned around just in time to see Serena pick up my laptop. My actual laptop, not the bag, hold it over the open window for exactly 1 second, and drop it. I watched it fall. 3 floors down. It hit the concrete path below with a sound that told me immediately that nothing inside it had survived. For a long moment, nobody moved. "Oops," Serena said. I walked to the window and looked down at the scattered pieces on the ground below. The screen had separated from the body completely. The motherboard had skipped sideways across the path. I had 3 years of project files on that machine, 2 years of personal documents, an entire folder of things I had been working on for the last 6 months that existed nowhere else. I turned around slowly. I didn't trust myself to speak immediately. "You can go now," Serena said pleasantly. I left without saying a word. I was still standing in the car park downstairs, looking at the broken pieces on the ground and trying to decide what to do, when Rachel appeared beside me. I hadn't called her. I hadn't messaged her. I genuinely didn't know how she had gotten there that fast, and in that moment, I didn't have the energy to ask. She looked at the remains of the laptop on the ground. Then she looked at me. Her expression was completely still. "She threw it out the window," I said. Rachel said nothing for a moment. Then she looked up at the building, located the window 3 floors above us, and appeared to make a quiet decision. "Leave this with me," she said. "I'll have someone repair what can be recovered. The data might be salvageable." She paused. "But she broke my husband's property. I'm not letting that go." She handed me her keys. "Wait by the car." Then she walked back inside the building. I waited. About 3 minutes passed. Then I heard it. A deep, rhythmic sound coming from the floor above, like something structural was being adjusted at speed. I looked up. A crew of workers in helmets had appeared in the corridor outside Serena's apartment. Rachel was standing among them, pointing calmly at the door with the specific confidence of a person who owned the building, which, as I was rapidly learning, she did. Serena's door opened. Serena appeared. She looked at the workers. She looked at Rachel. She started shouting about lawsuits and criminal damage and calling the police and the rights of private citizens. Rachel listened to all of it, without changing her expression once. "This property belongs to the Liu family," Rachel said, when Serena stopped for breath. "I purchased it this morning, so technically you've been living in my building. The door you just locked belongs to me. The walls belong to me. And you," she added almost gently, "will be receiving a formal notice to vacate." She tilted her head. "Also, you threw my husband's laptop out of my window, so we're not quite even yet." Serena's face had gone from red to white to a color I didn't have a name for. Rachel turned to leave, then stopped and looked back one more time. "Jason is mine," she said simply. "You had 3 years, and you wasted them. That's not his fault. That's yours. I'd suggest you spend the next few weeks finding a new apartment instead of thinking about him." She walked back down to where I was standing. I looked at her. "You bought the building?" "I made a call," she said, taking her keys back. "Get in the car." We drove back to Rachel's apartment in silence. A comfortable silence, not an awkward one. I was still processing everything that had happened since I woke up that morning, and Rachel seemed content to let me. When we arrived and carried the shopping bags upstairs, I discovered that the butler had been busy. All of my belongings, everything from my previous apartment, packed neatly into labeled boxes, were already stacked in the hallway. I stared at them. "Did you tell him to do this?" Rachel looked at the boxes with an expression of someone reviewing a piece of work they hadn't requested but couldn't entirely disapprove of. "No," she said. "He decided that himself." I looked at the boxes, then at Rachel's apartment, then back at the boxes. "I should move these back. I can't just—" "It's already late," Rachel said. "Moving everything back tonight makes no sense. And before you argue, there's a study. You sleep there. I sleep in my room. It's a large apartment. We'll figure the rest out tomorrow." I thought about protesting. Then I thought about where else I was going to go at this hour, with a broken laptop, no functioning apartment, and a marriage certificate with my name on it. "Fine," I said, "the study." Rachel nodded. Then she picked up 2 of the boxes and carried them toward her bedroom. "Wait," I said, following her. "The study is the other way." These are yours, she said without stopping. But my room is the only room with a wardrobe. You can't keep your clothes in the study, then there's nowhere to put them. She opened her wardrobe door. One side had been cleared. This section is yours. It's more practical. I stood in the doorway of her bedroom, holding a bag, watching her efficiently allocate wardrobe space, and tried to remember at what point in the day I had lost all control of the situation. I was fairly certain it had been before I woke up. Thank you, I said finally. She pointed at a drawer near the bottom. Don't open that one. I looked at the drawer. Obviously, immediately I wanted to open it. I didn't. Later that night, I was sitting on the study bed when my phone rang. It was Yan. I just heard, he said without preamble. The city's most powerful heiress. You. A marriage certificate. How? I lay back on the pillow and stared at the ceiling. It's a long story. I have time. I'm not sleeping until you explain this. I told him everything. The bar, the drinking competition, waking up with the certificate, Rachel's calm explanation, the grandparents, the mall, Serena's window, the butler, the wardrobe. When I finished, Yan was quiet for a moment. Then he said, very carefully, Jason, think about what you just told me. I know how it sounds. Rachel Liu, a woman who runs businesses, who owns half the buildings in this city, who has security teams on call, happened to be at the same bar as you, at the exact right moment, and when a drunk man grabbed her arm and pulled her toward a civil affairs bureau, she, a woman with the resources to stop anything she wanted to stop, just let it happen. I said nothing. She didn't call anyone, Yan continued. She didn't push back. She didn't get in a cab and go home. She went with you. And then she married you. And now she's already moved your things into her apartment and cleared wardrobe space for you. He paused. Does that sound like an accident to you? I sat up slowly. Yan, I said, I'm just saying what you're already thinking. I was quiet for a long moment. Through the wall, I could hear the faint sound of Rachel moving around in her room, unhurried, completely at ease, like she was exactly where she had planned to be. She seems genuinely happy, I said finally. That's what I'm telling you, Yan said. The next morning, I woke up still thinking about what Yan had said on the phone the night before. I lay there in the study for a while, staring at the ceiling, turning the question over in my mind. Rachel was already up. I could hear her moving around in the kitchen, unhurried as always, completely at ease. That ease was the thing that kept getting to me. She never seemed surprised by anything. She never seemed caught off guard. Everything around her just arranged itself. I got up, washed my face, and told myself to stop overthinking. At breakfast, Rachel mentioned that her secretary had managed to locate a technician who could look at my broken laptop. The hard drive might be recoverable. She said it the way she said most things. Briefly, practically, without making a production of it, and went back to her coffee before I could respond properly. Rachel, I said. She looked up. Thank you. Genuinely. If those files are recoverable, I don't know how to pay that back. She tilted her head slightly. It's a thank you. Shouldn't it come with something better than just the words? I blinked. Like what? A name, she said. You keep calling me Rachel, very formally, very correctly. She picked up her cup again. Try something else. I looked at her. She was watching me over the rim of her cup with that particular expression, the one that gave nothing away but suggested she was quietly entertained. Thank you, I said carefully. Beautiful. Her expression didn't change. Thank you? I tried again. Very, sister? Still nothing. Just the faintest curve at the corner of her mouth. I picked up my spoon, pointed it at her with great ceremony, and said, Thank you, wife. Her expression broke completely. Both eyebrows shot up, her eyes curved, and for just a moment she looked like a teenager who had been caught off guard. Younger and softer than I had ever seen her. She pressed her lips together immediately to contain it, but it was too late. I had already seen it. Don't push it, she said. You started it, I said. She stood up and took her cup to the kitchen, but she was smiling as she went, and she didn't try very hard to hide it. That evening, I couldn't sleep. I had drunk too much coffee after dinner and ended up sitting on the edge of the study bed, scrolling through my phone, waiting for my brain to slow down. At some point, I wandered into the hallway and noticed that Rachel's bedroom light was still on. I knocked lightly. "You're still up? Come in." I pushed the door open and leaned against the frame. She was sitting cross-legged on her bed with a book, completely composed, as though it were the most natural thing in the world for her husband to appear in her doorway at 11 at night. My eyes drifted to her phone on the nightstand. The screen was on, showing her wallpaper, 3 small cartoon figures, yellow and cheerful, lined up side by side. I went very still. "Rachel," I said slowly, "those 3 little figures on your wallpaper." She glanced at her phone. Something moved quickly across her expression, fast enough that I almost missed it. Then her face settled back into its usual calm and she looked at me with mildly puzzled eyes. "What about them? Did I give those to you?" "What are you talking about?" she said. "What little figures?" The disappointment hit harder than I expected. I sat down on the edge of the chair near her door. "You really don't remember? 3rd grade. We went shopping together. You, me, and your cousin. There was a claw machine near the exit. I played it about 7 times trying to win those 3 figures and finally got them. The prizes were too bulky for me to carry home, so I gave them to you." I paused. "Your phone wallpaper is the same set." Rachel was quiet for a moment. Then she said thoughtfully, "Now that you mention it, I think I do remember something like that. But it was so long ago." She tilted her head. "Are you sure it was you who gave them to me?" "Could have been anyone." "I'm sure," I said. She looked at me for a moment with an expression I couldn't entirely decode. "Maybe," she said finally. "I honestly don't remember clearly. The doll's been with me so long it just feels like it's always been there." I looked at the wallpaper again. 3 little yellow figures, exactly the same as the ones I had spent 40 minutes and a week's worth of pocket money trying to win from a claw machine in 3rd grade. I said goodnight and went back to the study. I lay down and stared at the ceiling for a long time. She remembered. I was almost certain she remembered. But she had chosen, very deliberately, not to say so. The question was why. The next morning, Rachel had an early meeting, so I went to the mall alone to check on the progress with her wedding dress. The shop assistant had called the previous day to say the next fitting was ready, and Rachel had asked me to go take a look and report back. I arrived at the mall and made my way toward the bridal section. I was almost there when I heard a familiar voice from the jewelry counter nearby. Loud, comfortable with itself, the voice of someone who had never once been told no. "I'll take that one. And that one. Actually, wrap up the whole display case on the left." I slowed down and looked over. A young man was standing at the center of the jewelry store with 3 or 4 girls arranged around him like an orbit. He was well dressed in the way that some wealthy young men are, expensively, visibly, with the specific intention of being noticed. He was picking up necklaces and bracelets and handing them to the girls one by one, not even looking at the price tags. I recognized him after a moment. His name was Yunshan, a younger relative of the Chen family, one of the 3 major families in the city. I had seen his face at events before. He had the easy arrogance of someone who had grown up being told that the world was arranged for his convenience. I turned back toward the bridal section and minded my business. About 3 minutes later, a sharp voice cut through the background noise of the mall. "I told you to hang up the closed sign. When my sister-in-law decides this store is off limits, it's off limits. Do you want to keep working here or not?" I looked over again. Yunshan was now standing directly in front of the shop manager, jabbing a finger toward the entrance. 2 of the female shop assistants had gone pale. The manager was smiling tightly and saying something about policies and procedures, clearly trying to de-escalate without actually agreeing. Yunshan wasn't interested in de-escalation. "Liu Ruyan is going to be my brother's woman," he announced, loudly enough for half the floor to hear. "Which means everything connected to her is connected to the Chen family. So when I say hang up the sign, you hang up the sign. Are we clear?" The shop manager looked at me helplessly. I set down the sleeve of the jacket I had been examining. walked over, and stopped a few feet from Yunshan. "She's not going to be your brother's woman," I said. "She's already my wife." Yunshan turned around. He looked me up and down with the particular thoroughness of someone who has just spotted something beneath his notice. "And who are you?" he said. "Jason," I said. "Jiboda, Liu Ruyan's husband." He stared at me for a moment. Then he laughed, a short, disbelieving sound. "Jiboda? Right. And what family is that? What connections? What background?" "None," I said. He blinked. He had clearly been expecting a different answer, a name to measure against, a family to weigh. My complete absence of pretension seemed to confuse him more than a rival family name would have. "You're nobody," he said slowly. "You're nobody, and you're standing here telling me that Liu Ruyan is your wife?" "Her name is on the certificate," I said. "Same as mine." The girls around him had gone quiet. The shop assistants had gone very still. Yunshan's expression had shifted from amusement to something colder and considerably less comfortable. "My brother will hear about this," he said. "And when he does, you're finished. Liu Ruyan will apologize to me personally, and so will you. Or I'll make sure this story gets told everywhere." "Before you do any of that," I said, "apologize to her." "Excuse me? You just announced to this entire floor that Rachel Liu is going to be passed around between your family like she's a piece of furniture," I said. "She's a person. She's my wife. Apologize." Yunshan stared at me. Around us, the floor had gone very quiet. People had slowed down. Heads had turned. "You're insane," he said. "Do you know what the Chen family will do to you?" "Apologize," I said again. He didn't. He laughed instead, a sharp, ugly sound, and started to turn away. I reached out and caught his arm. What happened next was not something I had fully planned. But he had just stood in a public space and spoken about Rachel like she was an object to be claimed. And something in me had made a decision before my brain had finished the sentence. 3 times. Not hard enough to seriously hurt. Hard enough to be unambiguous. The floor went completely silent. Yunshan's hand flew to his face. He stared at me with an expression that had moved past anger into something closer to shock. The shock of a person who had never once, in their entire comfortable life, experienced an immediate consequence. "You hit me," he said. "You insulted my wife in public," I said. "Apologize to her. Now, or I'm not done." Yunshan pointed at me, his composure fully gone. "You're finished. You're completely finished. My brother is going to—" The sound of heels on marble cut through everything. Sharp, unhurried, deliberate. Rachel walked onto the floor. She must have arrived at the mall while this was happening and come directly here. She had the look of someone who had assessed the situation in about 3 seconds and arrived at her conclusions. Her expression was the still, cold version of calm. The one that was not warmth, but the complete absence of concern about what came next. She stopped beside me. She looked at Yunshan once, briefly, the way you look at something you have already decided you are done with. "Are you qualified to demand an apology from me?" she said. Yunshan opened his mouth. "Don't," she said. He closed it. She reached over, smoothly, without looking at me, and took my hand. Then she held it with both of hers and pressed it lightly between her palms. The way you'd check whether someone was cold. My hand was, in fact, slightly sore. She didn't say anything about it, she just held it. Around us, people were staring. Rachel didn't acknowledge any of them. She looked at Yunshan one final time. "Leave," she said simply. He left. The girls went with him. The floor exhaled. Rachel was still holding my hand. I looked down at our joined hands and then at her profile. The particular stillness of her face, the deliberate way she had walked in and stood beside me without hesitation. "You were already in the building," I said. "I came to check on the dress fitting," she said. "How long were you watching?" A pause. "Long enough." She let go of my hand, but slowly, and as she turned to lead us both toward the bridal section, she didn't look at me, but the corner of her mouth moved just barely in a direction that I was starting to recognize. She had arrived early. She had watched. She had waited to see what I would do before she stepped in. I was beginning to understand that very little about Rachel Liu happened by accident. Rachel hadn't moved from where she was standing. I had assumed she would step in the moment things escalated. That was how I had read the situation. But she had stayed back, arms folded lightly, watching, not with alarm, not with concern, with the quiet attention of someone who had already made their assessment and was waiting to see whether the outcome confirmed it. Yunshan was staring at her now, looking for the reaction that would tell him how much trouble he was actually in. Rachel tilted her head slightly and spoke in the tone she reserved for things that were beneath her patience. "Jibota slapped you because you insulted his wife," she said. "I didn't stop him because you deserved it. And if you want to escalate this, if the Chen family wants to test whether they have more strength than the Liu family, I'm happy to find out right now." She stepped forward and took my arm, pressing it lightly against her side. "But I'll tell you this clearly," she continued. "If you put yourself in the middle of that fight, you will be the first one to fall. That's not a threat. It's a scheduling note." Yunshan's remaining composure collapsed entirely. He looked between the two of us, opened his mouth once, closed it, and then, with the specific gracelessness of someone retreating while trying to look like they aren't, turned around and walked toward the mall exit. His group of girls followed quickly behind him. The floor exhaled. Rachel turned to the mall staff around us and spoke briefly and clearly. She told them that from this point forward, her husband's word carried the same weight as hers in any Liu family property. Any request he made was to be treated as a request from her directly. If there were questions, they came to her. If there were problems, they came to her. But if Master Jibota was present and gave a decision, that decision stood. The staff nodded. A few of them glanced at me with expressions that had shifted somewhere between respect and careful reassessment. I looked at Rachel. "You didn't have to do that." "I know," she said. She looked at my hand, the one I had used, and pressed her own hand briefly over my knuckles. "Does it hurt?" "A little," I admitted. She released my hand without comment and started walking toward the bridal section. "Come on, the dress is waiting." We sat together in the wedding hall for a while after that. Rachel waiting for the dress alteration to be finished, me sitting beside her scrolling through my phone and trying to process everything that had happened in the last 48 hours. The shop assistants moved around us quietly and efficiently, and the mood had softened from the tension of earlier into something that felt almost ordinary, almost comfortable. "Rachel," I said eventually. She looked up from her phone. "You and Yunshan's brother, Chen Kaigi, was there actually ever an arrangement between your families, a marriage contract?" She considered the question for a moment. Then she nodded slowly. "Chen Kaigi's father approached my grandfather at some point, some preliminary discussion, but my grandfather refused. He never agreed to anything formal." She paused. "Yunshan found out and decided that made me his brother's property anyway. He's been using it as an excuse to come to Liu family properties without paying for months." I stared at her. "He's been stealing from your stores? Taking things without settling the bill and daring anyone to challenge him about it," she said. So I quietly gave instructions to all the staff below me. "Don't give the Chen family face. They pay the same as everyone else. If they refuse, you call security." She tilted her head slightly. "I didn't expect him to show up today personally." I looked at her profile, the complete composure, the lightness in her voice when she said it. Like the whole situation was merely a minor administrative inconvenience she had already resolved. "Rachel," I said, "why didn't you just deal with this yourself weeks ago?" She turned to look at me with an expression that was difficult to read. "Some problems," she said carefully, "resolve themselves better when the right person deals with them." She picked up her tea and didn't elaborate. I sat with that answer for a long time. A little while later, my phone rang. It was Yan. "I heard," he said before I could speak. "The whole mall heard. Are you okay?" "Fine," I said. "How's your hand?" "Fine." "And Rachel?" She threatened to dismantle the Chen family's business holdings in approximately 10 seconds and then went to try on a wedding dress, I said. A pause. "She's incredible," Yan said. "I know," I said. Then I caught myself. "That's not, I just meant, sure, Yan said, in a tone that communicated exactly how much he believed me. We talked for a few minutes about his older brother. Yan's brother had died in an accident some years ago, and lately Yan had been visiting the grave more often. He mentioned it the way he always did, briefly and without self-pity, but I could hear the weight underneath it. I told him I would go with him when he was ready. He said the day after tomorrow would be fine. Before I hang up, Yan said, I just want to say, you stood up in that mall today. You didn't wait for her. You didn't look around to see if anyone else was going to deal with it. You just stood up. I didn't say anything. She noticed, Yan said. I'd bet everything I have on it. He hung up. I was still thinking about that when Rachel's voice came through clearly from 2 floors up, projected just enough to carry deliberately to the wedding hall where I was sitting. Brother, the dress is adjusted. You can come up and see. Half the people in the wedding hall looked at me at the same time. I stood up as casually as I could manage and went upstairs. Rachel was standing in front of the fitting room mirror when I arrived. The designer, a college friend of hers apparently, who had updated the original dress design overnight, was adjusting the last of the fabric at the hem. The dress was different from the one she had worn in the store the first time. This one was quieter, less dramatic, more precise. It fit the specific way she stood and moved, like it had been made with her in particular in mind. She watched me in the mirror, and her expression was doing something that I had never quite seen on her face before. Something younger, slightly uncertain, as if she actually wanted to know what I thought and wasn't fully in control of wanting it. Well, she said. It's beautiful, I said. You're beautiful. She turned slightly pink. It happened so fast she clearly hadn't planned it, and the effort she made to compose herself immediately afterward told me everything about how much she hadn't planned it. The designer did well, she said. The designer had a good subject, I said. She gave me a look. I smiled. She turned back to the mirror. The designer glanced between the two of us and said nothing, but the expression on her face suggested she was filing this moment away for later use. When the final adjustments were done and Rachel had changed back into her regular clothes, we walked back down through the mall together. She didn't take my arm this time, but she walked close enough that our shoulders were almost touching, and at no point did she move further away. Near the mall exit, a commotion pulled my attention sideways. An elderly man had collapsed near the entrance. He was lying on the floor, conscious but clearly struggling, his breathing labored and wrong. Beside him, a young woman was kneeling and gripping his hand, her face completely pale, repeating his name in a voice that was barely holding together. Rachel had already stopped beside me. I was already moving. I crouched down and checked his breathing, his color, the position he had fallen in. The symptoms were what I recognized, from a first aid course I had taken at work 2 years ago, and from a very specific chapter that I had never expected to actually use. Mechanical suffocation, airway partially blocked. He needed immediate intervention, not waiting. I worked quickly and carefully, and about 3 minutes later, which felt considerably longer, the old man's breathing started to ease. By the time the ambulance arrived, he was conscious and stable. I stood up. The girl threw herself into a bow that nearly put her on the floor and started thanking me in a torrent of words so fast I could only catch every third one. The bystanders who had gathered were applauding lightly. I felt genuinely, thoroughly embarrassed. I just happened to be here, I said, and I happened to remember the right thing to do. You saved his life, the girl said. Her eyes were red and full. I rubbed the back of my neck and looked for a way to change the subject. Rachel was standing slightly behind me. When I glanced at her, her expression was still and composed as usual. But something in her eyes was doing something different. Something quieter, that she wasn't trying to project outward. She just looked at me for a moment. Then she looked away. We followed the ambulance to the hospital and waited until the old man was stable and resting. The girl came out of the ward and approached me again, this time holding a card out with both hands. Please let me thank Master Jibota properly, she said. I know it might not be possible today, but when you see him, please pass this along. The shop assistant who had come with us from the mall took the card gently. "Of course," she said. "I'll make sure he receives it." The girl left. I looked at the card in the shop assistant's hand. Then I looked at the assistant. She looked back at me. "She didn't recognize you," the assistant said carefully. "I know," I said. Rachel walked up beside me, looked at the card and said nothing. She took it from the assistant, glanced at it briefly, and slipped it into her jacket pocket. "I'll hold on to it," she said. I didn't object. We got home late. Rachel made tea while I washed up, and by the time I came out of the bathroom, the apartment was quiet and warm, and the lights had been turned down low. I had planned to go straight to the study. Instead, I stood in the hallway for a moment, looking at the light coming from under Rachel's bedroom door. I thought about the mall, about Yunshan's face when she stepped in beside me, about the hospital, and the way she had looked at me outside the ward, about the wallpaper on her phone, 3 small yellow figures that had been there long enough that she said she had forgotten where they came from, about all the things she did that were slightly too precise, slightly too prepared to be accidental. I knocked. "Come in." She was sitting on her bed with her book again, composed as always. She looked up when I entered and waited. "I've been thinking," I said. "I know," she said. "None of this is accidental, is it?" I said. "The bar, the Civil Affairs Bureau, the timing of all of it." She looked at me for a long moment. Then she closed her book. "Go to sleep, little guy," she said softly. "Big day tomorrow." She opened her book again. The conversation was closed. I stood there for another moment. Then I went back to the study, lay down on the bed, and stared at the ceiling in the dark. Through the wall I could hear her turn a page. She never answered the question. She never did. But I was starting to think the answer had been in front of me the whole time, in every small, deliberate, perfectly timed thing she had done since the moment I had apparently walked into her life and upended it, or since the moment she had walked into mine and arranged it, quietly, exactly the way she wanted it. I turned over. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, I fell asleep without thinking about Serena at all.